Welcome to the Strange Story Podcast, where we talk about all things strange and unexplained. In this show, I'll often interview people that you may know from paranormal television shows, as well as experts and producers who share their own strange stories. Along with my own experiences, we dive deep into all the things that make you ask, what if? Today I'll be talking with Dr. Travis Taylor from History Channel's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on. It's an honor to talk with someone who is so well credentialed and experienced in the scientific world that is interested in exploring the unexplained. And just so I have it right, and I want everyone to know, because again, like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years professionally, and I grew up in this world, but rarely do we have people investigating and working in this genre, right, that are as well credentialed and experienced as you. And so if I have this right, you've got PhDs in electrical engineering and physics and aerospace engineering, masters in
Uh,
astronomy, physics, mechanical, and aerospace engineering. Is that right?
no, well, you're kind of right, but
Okay.
no. So my PhDs are my first PhD was a dual degree between electrical engineering and physics. It was called optical science and engineering.
Okay.
It was lasers and quantum physics, is what it was.
Gotcha.
And my second PhD is in aerospace engineering, and I designed spacecraft for lunar missions and stuff for that particular PhD. Then
Okay.
I have three master's degrees: one in physics, one in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and one in astronomy. Then my bachelor's degree was in electrical engineering.
And then you've published a couple of dozen peer-reviewed journals on physics, optics, and military defense.
Yeah.
And you've written a textbook about how to deal with a potential alien invasion. Is that right?
Yes.
And you
Yeah. In
teach
fact, I got a
that
copy of it
you
somewhere.
teach that at the Air Force, right? Or to the air people
Yes,
there.
I do every spring, except not this year because of COVID-19.
Okay.
I teach a couple of day long course to Air Force officers in the space school
Okay.
on how we would defend the planet from an alien invasion.
And you build spacecraft, rockets, high energy laser weapons for the DoD.
Yeah, maybe.
And maybe potentially. And my favorite, you're a science fiction writer with 20 plus best-selling novels, which I think is fascinating. And I'm a big science fiction nut. It's why I'm in this world. And I wish I could write science fiction with so much real science and scientific applications and ideas in it, like you and so many other authors do. So that's a real treat for me to talk to you in just in regards to your authorship.
Well, that's sort of my niche genre in science fiction. It's kind of two. It's called hard science
Hmm.
fiction and military science fiction, and I kind of have a blend of the two. My fans expect that the science is based on real science and is believable, and the military action isn't stupid. And so the whole pieces of it. I not to pick on something, but I was watching that series. I binge watched the series War of the Worlds because of COVID
Uh-huh.
19. And the soldiers in that show, whoever wrote that show, has no idea how soldiers stack up and how they actually do an engagement. These guys are walking around just randomly through the woods, and they're getting picked off left and right.
Yeah.
No soldier in their right mind would do that. And I'm sitting there complaining about it the whole time, and it's usually difficult to watch science fiction shows with me because I'm I say my fans wouldn't let me get away with that.
Yeah, I bet, as a television producer, I watch a lot of that kind of stuff, those details, and I'll see so many times in different TV shows and movies how different it looks, how they have soldiers, military, people in the government acting like, well, it can't all be right. Somebody in this, one of these guys has to have gotten it wrong. Someone has to have gotten it
Sure. I
right.
mean, there's no way, and I make mistakes too. But I'll tell you, and I only know this mainly because Prometheus CEO owner Kevin Burns
Yeah.
that does Ancient Aliens and Skinwalker Ranch and all this.
Right.
He was also one of the executive producers, and I think exactly what the right credit is for Lost in Space, the new series that's on Netflix, because he bought all the rights to all those old Irwin Allen shows.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, and so And when it comes out, he always asks me to look at them and say, okay, well, how's the science here? What do we do? And the only thing out of both seasons that I gave him a hard time about, and it's not his fault or anything, but science fiction shows always get space exposure wrong.
They all do it different. Everybody does it different.
They all do it different, and they all get it wrong. I mean, we've had astronauts in space where their suits leaked or they had emergencies, and we know what happens. We did experiments in pressure chambers and all these things, but they always get it wrong. There's one little scene, not to give you a spoiler, but they get in a box and they're going to try and move through one point of space to another point to save some people.
I know the scene.
Cold.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the way that works. I've got a satellite in space right now that's about the size of a 12-pack can of soft drinks. And our biggest problem isn't that it stays cold, is that it stays hot. If you have a heat source on the inside of a box, there's nothing in space to cool it off. There's no wind blowing by. There's no water. There's no air. The only way it can cool off is by infrared light being emitted from it. And that takes a long time. So these people in this box, they would have gotten hot instead of getting cold.
Because of their body heat.
That's the only, because of body heat, right?
Yeah.
And that is the only thing, though, in the whole series that I had a problem with. I didn't really have a problem with. It was something good that I could give him a hard time about.
I love that show. I grew up.
Great. I loved it.
I grew up, my father watched Lost in Space, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers. So that's how I grew. That's where my interest in this came. And so I was very excited when they brought that series back, and did it. I think they did a fantastic job. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm giving him a hard time about, since he owns the rights, that we've got to have Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea come out. Soon too. I want to see the new version of the Flying Sub.
That would be neat. So the ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. You've done a lot. Not only in television and in your career and your experience. What was there something about Skinwalker Ranch that made you say, you know what, I'm into this project. I will get involved in this project because of this phenomenon and location, and kind of what did you know? What was it about this show and this experience and this investigation that made you say, okay, I want to do it?
Yeah, well, I've read the books. I've seen the YouTube videos that George Knapp talks about all the crazy stuff the Shermans went through, and I've seen the other TV shows and movies about it and documentaries. And I remember reading about Bigelow, looking into it. Bigelow never released any information to anybody. So I always thought, well, okay, there's nothing to this. Bigelow milked the government as much money as he could get out of it for it or whatever. And so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to look into it. And if these people truly believe these things are happening to them, there's some logical explanation. That's how I went into it, right? Maybe there's a hallucinogen growing out there. Maybe there's some sort of natural phenomenon that causes sleep deprivation or nightmares or something. Maybe there's a top secret government program that people are seeing things and they don't realize what they're seeing. That's how I went into this. And the first day, these guys briefed me on all the things they had seen for the last 3 years. When Brandon Brandon Fugal bought the property in 2016, and he's had a team out there for 3 years before I got there. And all they did was hide and watch. That was their modus operandi, was just to observe. And they showed me all these things on video and pictures of things that happened to them and told me all these crazy stories. And I remember telling them that they were all crazy. I mean, they were absolutely nuts. And within 30 minutes of being on the ranch, some crazy stuff started happening that I could not explain. And every single day, something happened that I could not explain. And so there was a point about a month in, because I stayed on the ranch. I lived on the ranch for 4 months, basically, last summer. And I remember a point about a month in, I came out of the woods by Homestead 2 and told Dragon, Brian Arnold, the security guy,
right? Yep.
Who he and I became really good friends during that time. Because he and I and Eric Bard were the only three that would stay there overnight. And I came out of the woods and I said, Dragon, I believe I'm batshit crazy like the rest of you guys.
What a great name for a guy on TV as well, right? Dragon.
Yeah. His Brandon actually gave him that nickname back in high school or something like that.
Oh, really? I didn't realize it.
He didn't call himself that.
That's amazing.
He actually doesn't like it, so I always do it on purpose.
Yeah, there's all you always got to. I always look at like, oh, there's a producer somewhere who's like, oh, I heard you're called Dragon. That's what you're called. We're calling you. And someone saying,
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what they said that.
don't
And
do
I said,
that to
I'm calling you
me.
Dragon every second, dude.
So it's same. I've heard all the stories. I read the book 15 years ago. I think I read the book, then that whatever it came out. It was fascinating, and guys like me that work in television have been trying to do this for so long, and obviously with Bigelow and had it under lock and key, and nobody could get in. And there's all the people
He
around.
still hasn't released
Yeah,
any of it.
none of that information. And then to hear, that this was going into the works was just really exciting. Since then, a lot of us, myself included, have done a lot of research and spoken to a lot of people just throughout the Uinta Basin, right? Because you figure, well, if I can't get on the ranch, does it go beyond that? And obviously it does. You hear the stories from everyone in that area, and they go back forever. And it's just fascinating to see that it's this whole area. And a lot of times I talk to people and they're like, no, I don't believe in any of that stuff. But there was this one time when this thing happened, and I think it's funny. But you've said that you think that looking at the Google Earth images, it's potential that that whole basin is from a meteor impact. Is that
I'm
right?
all, I'm almost, I would say I'm in the upper 90% convinced that there was a crash of a large object, whether it was a comet or an asteroid or an alien spacecraft. I
Right,
don't
an
know.
object, yeah.
Something hit there in the order of 10,000 to millions of years ago, and I have no idea how to figure out what that is. I mean, we'd have to do serious geological survey to figure that out. But there is definite. You can look at Google Earth, and it looks like from the east to the west, it hits, which is typical of an asteroid or comet type impact.
Hmm.
And you can see the salt flats were thrown from the impact, and the salt flats are all on the west side of the impact crater. And then there's other evidence that suggests it was an impact, and that's the fact that there's gilsonite there. Gilsonite
Right.
is a mineral that we make asphalt out of, and it only is found in a couple of places on the planet Earth, and that's in the Uinta Basin. Some of it near Colorado, but not as much, and I'm not exactly sure why there, but not enough to go like do a bunch of mining for it. And then a place in Iran, which is near another basin. And so the other piece of evidence is that there's petroleum in the Uinta Basin. There are oil wells everywhere you can see out there, and there are a lot of new scientific papers suggesting that a meteor impact can create petroleum. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests this is what it was.
And that's a new the idea that the impact can create petroleum is a new idea. That's new research. That's not something we've always known.
I don't really know how new it is, but I've read a lot of papers lately
I see.
that suggest that is a process that can create it.
So you're probably the only person I could ever ask this question to. If it was, and let's say a meteor impact, are are there examples, or theoretically could a meteor bring with it something or create something through the impact that could explain a lot of the phenomenon there? Do we know about anything like that?
Well, let me give you one little bit of data, and it's not 100% proven yet, but there's some scientific papers written on it. In the Spanish flu in
Right.
1917, at that time frame, the Earth was passing through the tail of a comet. And if you look at some of the original outbreak positions, there have been some papers written that suggest that the virus was in the ice of the comet tail, and as the Earth passed through it, the virus then was exposed to people on the Earth as the Earth rotated through the comet tail. And now I don't. And again, it's just speculative papers, but and there's a lot of evidence that suggests that comets and asteroids can bring materials and things here. Could it be a hallucinogenic thing? Could it be just from the sheer energy of the impact, something that huge, and the geology was just right in Utah that it created something in the tectonic plates, something in the electromagnetic field of the Earth there. All that's a big speculative science fiction stretch, but I've seen things and recorded them with scientific instruments that are unexplainable by modern science as we know it. but so I have to extrapolate into science fiction ideas to try and figure out what it is that we're seeing.
And speaking of science fiction, I see a lot of the titles of your books, just have the word quantum in them. And you've said you are one of your degrees is essentially quantum physics, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So if I was a much smarter person, I would have tried to understand quantum physics throughout my life and focus my career on that. And by the way, with all of your degrees in education, did you start college when you were 5? How long did it take to
I
do
was
all
17.
17? Because you grew up in this
Yeah,
world, right, with your dad and
yeah.
okay.
Well, so um, when I was actually conceived at the time, my dad was driving across the river every day and crawling up inside the Saturn V and welding parts on it. And he actually worked on, the rocket that went to the moon. And my first birthday actually was I was born in '68, but in '69 the astronauts actually splashed down in the ocean from Apollo 11 on my first birthday.
Oh, wow. So it's in your
So that's
genes.
yeah.
So going back then to sort of the quantum, again, compared to you, another scientist, I'm sure I sound stupid when I ask some of these questions, but if there's ever a hint of possibility in science fiction, I love that exploring those possibilities and see if that one day we'll say, well, that wasn't fiction. So you know I'm trying to understand in all of the years I've been studying the unexplained, I have this inkling that a lot of these things are related to each other. A lot of the things that people experience and see, and they're so focused on locations and places specifics. And I know some people will say ghosts, aliens, monsters, spirits, whatever. I've become very interested in the not just the multiple worlds theory, but the multiple interacting worlds theory. And I look at spaces and places and say, wow, is this one of these, could this be one of these places where on that level, there is an intersection or something happening where on the quantum level or subatomic level, if that's the right word, these interactions cause things to take place. And I know that it's a lot of science fiction in those ideas because it's not observable, right? So it's not, that's why it's theory. Have you ever put your mind to those kinds of ideas and say, can quantum physics, the theory be used to explain some of the phenomenon that you see that you were experiencing at the ranch?
Yeah, so right off the bat, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a phenomena at the ranch. We call it the hitchhiker. And if you spend a significant amount of time on the ranch, sometimes, and we don't know why it chooses who it chooses, it will follow you and it will follow you home. And I know of several people, including myself, that have the crazy trickster phenomena and other things occurring to them now, and it never did before they went to the ranch. And what's really interesting is so if the nexus is in the Uinta Basin in Utah, and now I'm in Huntsville, Alabama, or somebody's in, say, Maryland or Florida or Oregon or wherever, uh, uh, then things start happening to them, and sometimes they correlate with events on the ranch. What does that sound like? Well, it sounds like quantum entanglement. It
Hmm.
sounds like somehow or other. See, here's the thing: our brains are actually quantum entanglement transmitters and receivers. That's how our brains actually work. They're quantum computers. And the universe is quantum based. And so when things happen in the universe, they're most like the way our brain, our particular brain, like your brain is different than my brain, for example, has evolved, then those things will sort of be received by my brain. And as
Right.
I'm transmitting things, those things will sort of will create the reality around me, right? And so it's possible that whatever you get exposed to on the ranch gets quantumly connected to you. And then when you separate from it, at vast distances, anywhere across the universe, it's the spooky action at a distance that Einstein hated.
Hmm.
Well, perhaps whatever that phenomenon is on the ranch, it's entangled to me now, and I will have phenomena occur while I'm not on the ranch. And that happens to a lot of people.
We talked about the near death experience project I was working on. We were looking at consciousness, especially at the time. Biocentrism was sort of the thing, trying to explain consciousness existing before life, therefore after death. They were looking at I guess, some people, nano microtubules in the brain that accumulate information and dissipate.
Yep.
And is that akin to what you're talking about? Is that the part of consciousness that could receive stimuli and hold that information or become connected?
Hold that thought. So I actually wrote a book about that topic. It's called The Science Behind the Secret, and there's actually a picture in this thing of what you just mentioned. Hold on. I was almost there.
So for everyone listening, a PhD has confirmed that my ideas are not crazy.
So right there is a picture of the human brain and all of the different neurons in it. And each of these neurons is made of billions of microtubulin processors that are this protein that actually act like a quantum computer processor. And so you have trillion, you have more. I calculated it was more than there are stars in the universe, quantum processors in your brain. And so you have the most amazing video rendering engine, reality rendering engine in your head. That's what you are.
So to that point, like, and I guess it's still theory, right? Because it's quantum physics. And how, you probably know better than most, how far away are we from having the technology to really understand this science and be able to put this information together, whether it's the brain or the phenomena at the ranch or other unexplained, like how far away are we? Because do you even know what the tools would be at this point that you would use to properly understand
without disruptive technology, meaning new technology that we don't know is going to come along? You can't answer that question, and without enthusiastic and appropriate amounts of funding to maintain the investigation at the levels with the equipment and instrumentation and brain power that needs to be thrown at it, you can't answer that question.
Yeah. It's when I was, again, going back to that near-death experience show, the original project was something called Mapping the Afterlife. And the reason for the project was because there's no funding or grants or research to say, let's take theology, history, quantum physics, consciousness, near-death experiences, all this stuff, and put it together and combine the data and see what emerges, because nobody funding that. So we said maybe a TV show could.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why that is. And honestly, a quick example of where the research is being done is actually through TV and books instead of by scientists. It's being done by enthusiasts who aren't trained to do it appropriately.
Right.
And what you get is 30 years and then 15, 16 seasons of Ancient Aliens, for example, studying the ancient astronaut theory, which there's nothing fringe or weird about that. Right. It's just trying to understand history and psychology and science and so on. So even the near-death experiences, who's studying that? Only enthusiasts. Nobody's being funded to do it unless TV funds somebody to do it, right? And here's why. Because we had egocentric, extremely arrogant scientists in the past, I'm not going to mention names, Carl Sagan, say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Nowhere in the scientific method does it say that.
Right.
The scientific method says, read all the background literature and form a hypothesis. Then develop an experiment to test your hypothesis. Then report your results after you do the analysis of your experimental data to the community. And hopefully the community can then repeat your experiment and get similar results, or at least explain why they didn't get similar results.
Yeah.
That's the scientific method. I never said extraordinary claims, none of that in there anywhere. And so when a TV famous guy like Carl Sagan gets on and says something like that, everybody believes, oh, well, he's the best scientist in the world. He's got to know. And no, and that's not what the scientific method says. And because of that, career scientists have been afraid to get involved in that research because there's no such thing as extraordinary evidence unless an alien lands in your front yard and says, take me to your leader, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not the scientific approach.
It makes sense, and again, I go back to that question of like, how do you even know what the equipment is to use? It's like trying to, measure the heat of the sun with a pool thermometer, right? Not knowing
So
the even
think
using the
about Ernst Rutherford. Nobody had ever seen an electron. Nobody had
right.
any idea what they were. And this guy was playing around with aluminum and gold foil and tin foils and all these different foils. And he was taking radioactive sources so that hopefully something would hit this aluminum foil. And people would have thought he was nuts, nowadays. But eventually he realized, oh, there's a thing scattering off of that. I'm going to call it an electron. And it's a little particle and it's part of the atom. And that's what science is.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we're trying to do at the ranch, and what should be done with all these fringe, extraordinary claims categories is you chip away at the stone. It takes years and money and many, many people. Einstein didn't come up with general relativity out of the blue. Hermann Weyl and Poincaré and a whole bunch of others had come up with similar theories up to that point, and Einstein just put it all together. He was the first one to see, oh, if I take this piece and that piece and this piece and that piece, stick it together,
Sure.
look what I got. And quantum physics has evolved in the last 100 years to something completely different than what it was originally. So it takes the community accepting we need to start chipping away at this stone in order to understand what it is.
Makes sense, and I hope that that this. I think what you guys are doing there, what you're doing there, shows that real scientific approach. But aside from the science, it's also just I know a creepy place and creepy experiences for people. What's the strangest thing that you could talk about that that you've come away with, whether it's an experience or understanding or information from this process?
It's both, actually. Some of my experiences were physically harmful, extremely scary, and then some of the experiences were uh, intellectually baffling in that that doesn't exist yet. We don't have that, and we have all these things on camera, scientific instruments, eyewitnesses, all at once in collaboration, so that people can't say we're making it up. And actually, the episode tonight that comes on, there's evidence in this one that's nothing like it has ever been seen ever before. And you watch tonight, and you're gonna think, well, that had to be a special effect, or it had to be made up. But I'm telling you, we were astounded, floored, and it was amazing. Now, I will tell you that in the last year of my life, actually 8 months, however it's long been since I first set foot on the ranch, I've had more nightmares than I had in the previous 50 years of my life.
Wow.
And I'm working on a theory as to why. I think it has something to do with the crazy microwave radiation that's always on out there. Along with the psyche, of it's a weird, creepy place. Combine all that. There would be nights that I would wake up out there screaming in terror, and then I'd realize, it was a crazy dream. And then I'd look around. Well, was it a crazy dream?
But those nightmares followed you home. You had them after, or only while on the ranch?
I had one a few nights ago.
Okay. Because that's weird, right? That's really weird. I mean, you could think maybe it's stimuli in the location, but now you're away from it and still having it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one of those things that it physically or traumatically affects you once you've been. Maybe it's like PSTD or something,
Okay.
or PTSD. I mean, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's actual, real physical phenomena based on the exposures. But I had some pretty weird exposure while I was out there that actually was medically harmful. And the next day we went to find the source of it, and there was nothing there. And so had I not had physical symptoms, you just thought I was nuts. And so we talk about that. It's an imperative that we do this study, because whatever this is not confined to the barbed wire fence around the 500 acres.
Sure. Right.
It's in the whole, thousands of square miles of the Uinta Basin, and everybody that lives there is being exposed to whatever this is. And so we've got to find out, just from a safety perspective, what's going on there.
So you said you're working on a theory about the dreams and what and the nightmares and why they're happening. How is that going here? How deep into that are you?
Well, I've been doing the literature research, and I've been talking with the rest of the guys on the team, and they actually, I think we're on to something. Maybe it could be a side effect, or it could be part of it.
Hmm.
We see, like you saw in the first episode, we detected all those microwaves in the first 30 minutes of being there. They happened every day, all the time, and they would happen. It's really weird in the middle of the night. And a really interesting thing is there's a phenomena that's occurring out there that is microwave radiation and radiation that covers the entire radio spectrum. Like every channel on your dial suddenly lights up and lasts for about an hour.
And that's not normal.
And no, that can't happen. I mean, that would, so much energy, mankind couldn't do that. We don't know how to do that. And when I did some, myself and Dr. Segala, Jim Segala, and I, we started working some of the math out on if we wanted to recreate that, what would it take? And the only thing we came up with was that some event, large energy event, happened in the past and in the future, and they're somehow quantum connected through time. And that just makes no sense, and it's a science fiction crazy concept, right? There might be some others, but that's the only one we've come up with so far. But anyway, before those phenomena occur, I have this instrument in my trailer where I'd stay, and so I could turn it on and look, and I could see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And Eric Bard was doing the same thing in the command center with a different instrument, different brand. We did different elements and components, so we could compare them and say, hey, we're getting the same thing on different instruments, right? And the ranch dog, William, he liked to sleep under my camper, right up under my bed. And always before this phenomena occurred, he would start barking and howling. And I didn't realize it at first. So I'd get up, go outside and look, see if he was seeing a coyote or something. And then I'd go in, I started going in and saying, well, let's just go check the thing. I'm up. And this phenomena would be occurring. And then I started paying more attention, and somehow or other, William, the dog, was detecting this phenomena. Or the correlation was he would bark at every time this phenomena occurred. So somehow or other, it's not just in the radio spectrum. Maybe it's going down into the acoustic spectrum at a sound that William can hear. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's affecting his body, like he's in a microwave or something, and he's more sensitive to it than we are. And then the other thing is we saw the cows move when it would happen too. The cows would act crazy in a herd and move all in one direction, like they were getting away from something. Can't explain that, but I know this is a phenomenon that occurs out there.
Yeah, I'm excited for tonight's episode. This will obviously air after that has aired, and maybe another episode. So it's I don't know. I've been doing television for a long time, and I rarely get that excited for new episodes of shows. And I saw that, in the coming up on in the last one, it looks really fascinating. And I have to say again, I'm just really excited you're out there, that the show is finally coming out, and that there's this, what else could it be, scientific approach to these things. Now, have you come up with any ideas of what it's definitely not?
Yes, it's definitely not a government classified program. I've spoken to folks within the government and at various levels in these meetings, and they are just as baffled by this as we are. We actually had the Attorney General, I believe it was, of Utah, come out there and tell us that he's concerned about it as well. They have no idea what it is. The governor of Utah has no idea what it is. So what we know it's not is, like you see in science fiction shows or whatever, it's the Air Force or the Army or the Navy playing tricks on people just to see what happens. It's not some new crowd control weapon or anything like that. Which, I had that as a potential idea.
Sure.
But until I made the measurements I made and realized that we do not have the technology to create these phenomena, even even if you allowed for some super top secret program to be 10 or 15 years ahead of modern technology, this is hundreds, maybe thousands of years ahead
Wow.
of what we have, whatever this is.
Do you subscribe to the multiple interacting worlds theory, the multiple worlds theory? Do you
So
trust that's
that's a
possible?
theory. That's a theory, and let me give you sort of my visual interpretation of it. Have you ever played Minecraft or any of these games that are on servers,
Sure.
and you go to the server lobby, and there's all these different doors of different games you can go play,
Mm-hmm.
and each one of those doors you go in, and you're in a new universe, right? In this universe, you're playing one player versus the other player, or this universe, you're throwing snowballs at each other, or
Yeah.
this universe, you're actually in Minecraft building, or whatever. Um, and then even within Minecraft, there are other worlds that if you figure out how to build a portal, you can travel to them. Well, I was telling you earlier that our brains are the best quantum rendering engine, reality renderer that there is. I mean, you think about it, when you play a game like Fortnite or Minecraft, you don't see the entire field of view. I mean, you don't see the entire island or place until you turn toward it. The video card renders that. Well, you don't see reality until you experience that reality. You are rendering your reality as you move your head around, as you move yourself around and interact with the universe. So it's quite possible that whatever our universe is just one of these quantum realities, these simulations or video games or whatever you want to call it, and that there's a lobby, and there's somewhere, actually you somewhere, if you're not simulated being within this, whatever this is, then you're somewhere else. And this is your rendering engine, your avatar, right? So there's perfectly possible that there's multiple of these, trillions, infinite number of them, of simulations, of game rooms, or whatever you want to call them, universes. And maybe they interact with each other through a lobby. Like when you die, maybe you go back to the lobby. What happens when you die
Right.
in these
Right.
games, right?
Yeah.
Um, or maybe there's a way to interact and create doorways back to the lobby or just to other games that are nearby. Maybe whoever created it left back doors.
And so if the basin is a lobby, that maybe it's not even or the lobby or a place where could be a lobby or what you're
What if it's a
saying.
glitch
Well,
that
glitch,
opened up a portal to the multiple other games
sure.
or rooms or whatever, right?
Or and in that regard, if it is, then perhaps others are studying it as well in different time and space.
Maybe they
Maybe
figured
it's
out,
wild.
how to open the door from their side, right? And we're just seeing the door open.
I know we have to go. I always say people talk about, ghosts and they're like, oh, I said, listen, I know you think it's dead Uncle Charlie who's banging on the wall over there, but could it just be as possible that in another place, in another world, in another time, there's some living person in this same space that you're occupying in a different way, and they're interacting with some noise they're hearing on the other side of their wall. And I say the same kind of thing. So it's if it's a space that is um, connecting places, we may not be the only ones studying that
Well,
space.
hey, well, we only see the visible spectrum, which is like this much of the entire, electromagnetic spectrum. How do you know there's not creatures walking around right
Right.
now that are just in such they reflect and absorb light in such a way that our eyes can't see them?
And I wonder, we're pumping things into let's say there's a doorway or a portal, whatever, and you're pumping some kind of energy in to experiment and observe somewhere else. Someone's pumping microwave energy into it, and it's spilling out all over the place. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah,
It's fun ideas.
it could be whatever the things are, the phenomena is. It could be that it changes our environment in such a way, like radio waves come from a cell phone tower, pass by it, may get shifted to gamma rays,
Mm.
right?
Oh, that's
There's
interesting.
gravitational shifting. It could be anything, and it could be. There are some that believe that it's a spying mechanism from either someone from distant away or another universe or whatever you want to use it. But it's like a super advanced million years from now, drone,
Mm,
and someone's spying at us. But I've heard
interesting.
so many different scenarios, and so many different stories. I don't know what to believe, so I don't believe
Right.
anything.
Sure.
I just want to poke it with a stick and see what flies out of it.
And this is also why science fiction is great, is because you can write the story of the what if, and have fun with it without having to worry that it may not be provable. Now it's using your imagination, it's coming up with ideas, it's presenting possibilities that are just as plausible as any other, and it's
But
fun.
in a lot of cases, science fiction precedes the science. In 1951, Robert Heinlein wrote Between Planets. And in a paragraph in there, on one page, he describes a stealth vehicle to a T. The guy who started the stealth program was reading these Russian electromagnetic papers at the same time he was reading the science fiction book, and it gave him the idea. He put the two
Mm,
together, and this
interesting.
Robert Heinlein story stimulated the whole stealth program.
Oh, wow. So it's
So
like self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, in a bit.
yeah,
There's people talk all the time about there is no past, present, future. It's everything's happening at the same time, and artists and specifically or scientists aren't necessarily creating new ideas as much as they are remembering ideas and things that have happened, will happen.
the
And
Akashic record idea.
yeah, yeah. And that's so like in that scenario, having that idea that maybe you see it in the future, put it to paper, someone takes an idea and decides to create it is just it's kind of it can mess with your mind, I guess, if you're not if you
In a
gotta
near
go in
infinitely
circles.
large universe and infinitely old universe, with billions of years is infinite as far as I'm concerned. I mean, everything has been invented. Everything has.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is tapping into whatever that information is somehow or other, and or if you invent it, you are reinventing it. I'll guarantee you.
Right.
Right? It's happened somewhere
Right.
in this universe.
That's amazing. Well, so Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, great show. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate this, and
I enjoyed it, man.
good
Thank
lu-
you.
good luck with the show. And I know it's doing really well, so I would expect to see season 2, and I'll
I
hopefully we
certainly
can.
hope so. And hey, let's talk again
Yeah,
anytime.
definitely. All right, Travis, take
All right,
care.
man.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, that was my interview with Travis Taylor, PhD, from History Channel's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which airs on the History Channel Tuesdays, 10 p.m., 9 Central. If you want to find out more about The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, please go to history.com. And you can also find them online on Facebook at facebook.com/history, on Twitter at history, Instagram at history and at history TV. And you could always search the hashtag Skinwalker Ranch. Again, History Channel, Tuesdays, 10 p.m., 9 Central, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Until next time, I'm Mark Marinaccio. Thanks for listening.